Hey, it's Chris Liege Games. What are we talking about? Biohack. Uchiba Koya, his latest design in the lines of the previous works of Aqua Garden and Ostia, which have also come to crowdfunding. This is now on crowdfunding. What do you need to know about it? It's doing some new worker placement things. It's staying tried and true with some other mechanisms. Does it work? It does. Let me show you why, though, because that's what's most important. Let's do this. Now, you may have heard this tale, right? Evil scientist creates mythical monster. Okay, now imagine that as a worker placement game. That's what you've got going on here as the core thematic incorporation of this in a nutshell. What it's doing, though, and how it's doing it is the unique aspect of things. A little bit of a twist on a familiar trope that you've seen before in the worker placement style. Now, what's in front of me here is the main board setup. It looks really busy. It's language independent, and that's what makes it a little bit tricky because there's some symbology that you actually need to know here. But don't be fooled. Once you get into it, it's relatively intuitive. You are a mad scientist, essentially, with 3 workers that you're going to be placing at various locations at the beginning of each round. When you place them, then you are going to be able to then pull them off of those locations and do additional actions. And that's where the twist is already. The twist is you have these locations, and depending on how many other workers are present at those locations when you pull yours off, that's going to give you the dynamic of how powerful that action is. The more workers that are still there, the more powerful the action. Also, placement side of things, because that is the resource gathering side. You get on the other side of this board, on the right side here, this is your experiment, creating your monsters. The core crux of this game, because the victory condition of this game is either most victory points at the end of 4 rounds, or it's who's created 7 monsters first. And to be clear, there's a lot of monsters to go through here. So that's what you need to know. Now, you get an asymmetric scientist that starts off at the beginning of the game. It's got a nice snake draft system at the beginning. You assign randomly the turn order over here, and then based off of that, you do reversed draft for your scientist. Now, the first game or 2, you're obviously not going to know what you're looking for, but all of these scientists have 3 various aspects that you're going to be checking for. They're turn by turn asymmetric passive power, and then 2 additional powers at the bottom of the card that you're going to be unlocking should you choose to do so, one of which is actually going to give you an end game scoring benefit. And there's multiple layers of the scoring that's going to go into the system, as you'll see in a minute. And you start out with just, at least here, what I have, 6 different characters that you can potentially do. And so that's going to give you a little bit of your strategy already, because these characters, in a majority of them, are going to make it easier to build, to buy, build a monster, right? Build a bear. Anyway, build or create your monsters from various tropes, mythologies, and religions here. And so you can see the cost of these monsters up here, and then the DNA that's needed, and then the bonus that they give you. And depending on the tier of the monster in the first place, it may give you a bonus during a certain phase or at a certain location as the most common level monsters, which are the easiest ones to build. The second tier of monsters is going to give you bonuses in terms of cost reduction for being able to create these monsters in the first place. And the third tier are the most expensive, the hardest to build, but they're going to give you more endgame scoring conditions and victory points, which is, what you're going for in the first place. With this game, you have 6 different pieces of DNA that you are going to be mixing, matching, and trying to acquire as you go across. And these are all going to be managed on your own personal player board. Your personal player board here is going to give you 3 rows for those aforementioned 3 tiers of monsters: the common, the medium, and the difficult. And the tricky part here is that you can only build so many of each monster, 4, 3, and 2. When you need to get 7 monsters, well, you're going to have to build some of the higher level ones in order to actually get the end game victory condition. And then it gives you a language independent run through of what this is. And then on the right side here, you can see where you're going to be keeping track of your DNA. Down here is where your scientist card is going to go. If I can find one of those right here. And then this is where you're storing your money, because obviously you need money in this game too. So that's your player board in a nutshell. There's not a whole lot else you need to actually see on the player board right now, so we'll put this away for the time being. Now, the board itself, though, seems really busy, but I already walked you through the 2 main areas. This is the main resource gathering. This is the main creating monsters, getting other things to be able to do in terms of banking, trading, getting resources for credits, credits for resources, and just also being able to score some of the end game scoring victory conditions. Because down here, for example, the DNA incorporation, in order to get some of these conditions up here that are actually win conditions, you can see some of these cards, for example, have 4 creatures with this DNA type. You then put your marker in the first slot. It gets you 7 victory points. But in order to actually count that, you don't get to put your marker there, these little markers, until you actually take this action. So that's the difference. This also down here is the thing that gives you the different unlock for one of your different scientist abilities. And so those are becoming very important from that aspect as well. Now, the tricky part is you're going, Chris, well, you're putting down your workers in the first place, right? Like, how does that actually done? If you're telling me the main mechanism is I'm taking them off. Well, the main mechanism of that is sort of a little bit of meta bluffing, if you will. Because what you've essentially got here at the beginning is you have 5 cards that are all symmetric between each character. And you have these different locations represented on the resource gathering side of things. And you choose 3 of these at the beginning of the round to represent where you want to put your 3 workers. And everybody then simultaneously flips them up. Then you lay them out. That's where turn order becomes very important. Now, they balance turn order because if you get 2nd, 3rd, or 4th in turn order, you're getting a resource to adjust for it, everywhere from a money to a medicine to the addition of a card that you can get. And so that's going to be the dynamic, is you have a static market out here, and that brings up the other dynamic that we're talking about. As those aforementioned monsters are put out there, there is a market that is placed down here that you are going to be slowly building up. Now, you'll see here, I just put out the common market, but there's going to be 4 cards for the 3 and 4 player game, and you're going to be able to buy these when you take certain actions down here, say in the basement. And what happens is this costs 2, 1, 1, and free in this column. At the end of the round, because it does not auto-populate once you take one, at the end of the round, the rightmost one moves over, everything else moves over 1 as well. The rightmost one is discarded, and then you fill it back up for all 3 rows. At the 2-player count, there's just less available. Less actions or less resources given at each of these spots. There's less monsters out in the first place. The turn order also just alternates in the 2-player mode, so you don't have to worry about that as much, but it's an interesting dynamic, and I think it's really necessary to give some of the push and pull that you want in a worker placement game, depending on what's important to you and depending on what you need to get. I mentioned the medicine as being one of the rewards here. You start off with 2 medicine bottles, 1 or 2 of which may be full depending on your turn order at the beginning of the game. What matters is you'll notice that if we slide these monsters back down and we pull the board back up here a second, you can see that I have a die sitting right here by the mountain and the river, because those are more dangerous places to go. And so if you venture there, if you pull one of your workers from that location, there is a strong chance that this little symbol right here is meaning that you are having to roll the die that is danger. Now, this is a feral DNA. I did roll nicely on this side, but if I rolled the little skull here, or if I rolled this guy right here, one of my workers actually gets injured. And so in this case, you'll see that I have, just so you can see them on the board, my workers all laying down. But normally in a game, you're actually going to have all of your workers standing up. And so what's going to happen, though, in this case, is you're going to actually have to lay one of your workers down, but not one of the ones out here, one of the ones on your player board already. And to be able to use that worker again, you have to heal them. So that's going to be another divisive, tricky aspect. Does it work? Yes. But it's an element that I'll talk about later that you may not like depending on, what your preferred play style is with a situation like this. The last aspect of this board that I have not touched on explicitly is the downtown area down here in the lower right-hand corner. And you'll notice that on this side, I have 4 different downtown locations that you can be taking as asymmetric, unique, replaceable worker placement spots. And what I mean by that is you'll notice that there are spaces that I have some of these workers in right here, the larger spaces, which means that any number of workers can be placed in there if I want to do those actions. But there are also individual ones down here that mean that if you are the first person to go there, you get this additional bonus action plus whatever's down at the bottom. This plus the bonus down at the bottom. Same thing with this one. So you're not limited necessarily. It's not as crunchy or tight, but you're definitely going to get a big bonus if you go there first. Now, these bottom ones, though, again, unique individual ones that are going to change on a round by round basis, because at the end of the round you clear those, but they're going to be 1 worker placement spots that you can additionally go in case you don't like something out here or you don't like something over here necessarily. And so it's going to give you additional ways in which you can interact, more resources of a certain type, or even discounting depending on what you prefer. That is the main gist of the game. That's it in a nutshell. Now, if you again fill up any of your rows up here. Then in the upper left-hand corner, you get to place one of your little markers again. That one scores automatically when you fill a row based on the number of monsters that it requires. 4 rounds, then you're done. That's it. Simple, straightforward. You get your actions. Now, just to run you through a quick example of, say, taking a turn, well, let's say it's yellow's turn here. They can choose to take one of their workers from either the bank or the hospital. If they choose to take it from the bank, then you count up how many other workers are present. Well, there's still 2 workers present, so you look over here and you say 2 workers right there. I get 4 money and I get 2 victory points. Now, let's say that this guy was over here and I take yellow off of this one, then I would get 2 of the purple DNA. I would get to refill one of my medicine bottles, and there you go. Now this obviously is also dependent on player count, so it varies a little bit on the player count at the 2, 3, and 4. So you're going to have slight adjustments there that are going to be taken into account on a player number variant. So that's nice. It's nice that it's not just one size fits all. It scales up a little bit more dynamically in that sense. So hearing that, what do I think? Pros, cons, and everything else in between. Pros, I mean, it just works. It's a very, very solid game. If you're looking for something medium weight worker placement, it's not incredibly light. There are a lot of dynamics that you're choosing because you have 6 different DNAs, as well as 4 different endgame scoring conditions, as well as 2 different areas you're always having to choose between of how you're going to take your turn. It gives you options, but it's not overwhelming. You can see the connections, you can make the connections. So it's not light, but it's also not going to be a heavy worker placement style game either. The other tricky aspect is it's going to be a little bit shorter. If you're looking for a little bit longer, a little bit more of an engine build aspect of things, this is not going to be that. And I'm okay with that personally. I prefer my worker placements to be 1 to 1.5 hours rather than 3 to 4. You only have 3 workers you're taking each turn, so each turn is significantly meaningful. Now, the downside of that is, again, you're going to have to be very, very thoughtful of how you're going to do things, because depending on what monsters are out and depending on what access you have to some of these actions, choosing your spots where you put your guys in the first place is going to be very dynamic. The con of this is, well, you're going to be dependent on a random draw from a deck with only 4 monsters out. So it's not going to change as much. It's only going to get at least 1 new monster per turn, usually more if people are buying them though. So it helps it out from that aspect as well. The other dynamic is if you just don't choose places where other people are, that's really going to potentially leave you flat. And I can see people being really disappointed by that, or just not being able to predict where other people are going to go and trying to match your strategy to what other people are thinking. So that's a dynamic that is going to be a little bit tricky as well. I can see people being turned off by that. I like the aspects of not just getting the victory points, right? Like there's nothing more frustrating than someone who just checks all the boxes. So I like the aspect that not only do you have to meet the requirements up here of what's listed, but you actually have to take a turn to go for that, meaning it's that important to you in the first place. I like the asymmetry. It gives you a lot of options down here in the downtown, as well as with all of your starting scientists that you have available to you, because the drafting eliminates some of the just, okay, well, he got this one, so it's going to be this much better, right? Like you can start tailoring it. The second the turn order gets down, what do I want to do? How do I want to mitigate that? Where do I want to go? And in case you're wondering, yeah, you recycle all those downtown ones, but I have a huge stack here that is easily not going to be gone through even in one game, swiping all 4 each turn. So you have plenty of variety and variability depending on what order, what combination, and how you need them to go on a turn-by-turn basis. Also, turn order. Turn order is going to be majorly important, and it gives you options, right? You're going to get bigger benefits for being later in the turn order. But if you're earlier in the turn order, like I mentioned, the actions that you're going to be taking from these individual locations are going to be much stronger. You're going to get more of a benefit even on this side or this side if you go first. So what's important? Where are you taking it from? What are you choosing to prioritize? It really puts a strong emphasis on that. Again, what can I see people not liking? Cons for me personally, again, it's sort of the die, right? You can really get screwed potentially if your workers continually get hurt at going at one of the higher risk, higher reward locations up here. And if you just roll poorly, again, there's not a whole lot you can do to mitigate that. Although they do give you the option to pay for 2 credits or a resource, one of the DNAs, to re-roll it. But again, there's no guarantee that your re-roll is going to be any different anytime, and you have to take the end result. So that's going to leave a bad taste in people's mouths, especially people who are looking at this as a pure worker placement strategic, where your options then are going to be more limited if you have a random roll of the die that's causing you to lose something that somebody else didn't get by sheer luck. Another pro, though, at the same time, is that fact that you've got these asymmetric scientists that are giving you multiple levels of unlocks. So it's not just, okay, this has one passive ability, right? It's one passive ability, another endgame scoring condition. So it's giving you a layer of points and how you're going to build your engine with more than just one area. I mean, the theme, okay, I'll take it. I like it. The monsters, okay, there's not a huge amount of tie-in depending on the resources and what they are. I mean, the artwork's fantastic, so I mean, you can't discount that, but it's not necessarily like, okay, wow, I really feel like I'm building a monster necessarily. You could easily replace the theme in that sense, but I really like it in the first place, so I can't really say too much bad about it either. I think the other big con is I don't think this game is going to be as good for you potentially at 2 players. On the 2-player side, with the risk of me not like flipping the table completely, right, and having all this stuff fall on the floor, the 2-player gameplay is just not going to be as deep. It's not going to be as meaningful because, again, with these workers, you're only going to have a maximum of 2 at each location. So the meaningful actions are just not going to be quite as strong, which isn't going to give you quite the dynamic, especially when the main aspect of this is taking them off sooner than somebody else's, right? A good portion of your interactions on the 2-player side may be just you. And having this unique worker mechanic where you're taking things off to get resources, it's going to be anticlimactic. So I can't recommend this one for 2 people. It's going to be best, and this is strange for me to say because this is usually what the opposite of what I say on this channel, is it's probably going to be best at 4 because of more dynamic, more crowdedness on this side, because this game is going to thrive off of that. Because you may not be first in an area, but you may be first in a different one, and it's going to allow you to prioritize or change your strategy on the fly. So how tactical can you be as well? That's a pro or con, depending on how you feel about this. I can see people who are looking at the lower player counts, and I wouldn't recommend it for this as a worker placement. It's going to be fine, but it's not going to give you the full engagement, son. Sort of like Jerusalem Anno Domini behind me, right? It's better at a 3 and 4 player count. You're getting a more fleshed out, excuse the pun, experience. So what do I think overall? It's a very, very solid worker placement game. If you are looking at this and going, I want something slightly unique, I want something solid, I want something intuitive, that is what this game is bringing. It's not going to wow you with a 3 or 4 hour overhead. The explanation and the rules are going to be like 10 minutes. And it just works and it flows smoothly with even having 6 different types of DNA that you're managing. And the worker removal to get your actions is, like I said, it's unique. And I enjoyed it from that aspect. Instead of domino like, okay, I have to get this, and this. Well, the dynamic of pulling off rearranges the ordering of that in my brain, and it makes it tingle in a good way. Because a lot of the times when you have increased depth in these games, I feel like I'm just overwhelmed and lost, and I'm not getting those connections as optimally. And this one does not make me feel like that, especially if you are not a regular worker placement person like me always. Is it going to be as deep as you may want if you're looking at a Lacerda? No, well, it's not. It's not trying to be. But it still has enough depth, especially at the 4-player count, that I'll make the argument of the interactions are going to be really meaningful and you will get enjoyment out of it still. So there you go. Uchibakoya, thank you for sending me the prototype copy. Happy to talk about it. Also, if you made it this far in the video, spoilers, let me know down below in the comment section because you can win a copy of Aqua Garden. He's one to put it out there for you guys who are interested in watching my video in the first place. So if you made it this far, you know what everyone else doesn't. There you go. It's on crowdfunding. Check it out. Again, the other thing I'll say about the other previous crowdfunding campaigns, a little tidbit here at the end. If you looked at Aqua Garden, if you looked at Ostia like I did when I covered them on the crowdfunding campaigns, they don't come any cheaper at the retail. Now, Chibakoya has had some stuff sell from the shop, the retail shop, his personal retail shop, but they have always been significantly more expensive. So if this does appeal to you, this is one of the few that I say you're better off backing it on crowdfunding if you're worried about it from a price standpoint. I don't say that a lot, but consistency. But again, sort of like your chip theories and your leader games, this is one that doesn't hit wide retail. You're going to get a better price point on crowdfunding. So if you're looking for it, not only is it a double whammy to support the publisher, but you're going to get it at a better price. So there you go. Those are my thoughts. Biohack. Let me know. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want. Peace out. Have a great freaking fantastic day. Stay classy.